Hello, friends. Oh, this was a week ago now that we launched all our Divine Mother stuff
Well, in the outer world.
in the outer world.
Yeah. Got launched a long time ago, I think.
Oh my gosh.
mm.
And it felt a little vulnerable, didn't it?
Yeah, I would say I found myself feeling a little anxious about it, even though I couldn't really explain why. Like, where is this sort of, little butterflies coming from? I mean, obviously, when you put yourself out there, you're going to be judged, and you might meet with criticism, um, and that's just part of being in the world. So that, and that's not necessarily happened, but I think that's what we can fear.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting thing about doing something that is putting yourself out there because there's that fear and there's also a feeling of emancipation when you put yourself out there and just allow yourself to be. It's not like we were hiding this before. I mean, I wrote about it in Becoming Dungeon Master, that's like 2 years ago or something. But
More than that, yeah.
yeah, but it's still just we weren't as explicit about it as we're being now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we would have open conversations, like, just let's just talk about this.
On videos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but what this brings up for today's talk is this idea of vulnerability. There's lots of ways, reasons, I mean, cultural and personal, that we are encouraged, I feel like, towards having up armor, having up
Mm.
shells.
Oh yeah, lots of reasons.
Yeah. But when we can go into vulnerability, there's these hidden gifts. And this is one of those secret things that I don't think our culture talks about very much. But there's some really actually great gifts waiting there.
Well, I was just having a conversation with a friend earlier today, and we were talking about learning. And we were talking about if you're in a group of people and you feel like you need to know everything, and you come across someone who kind of knows more than you, but you have that armor up of I have to know, and you kind of are hiding, oh gosh, don't see that I don't know. Not only are you filled with all this anxiety, and not only do you feel like you have to put on a front, but you rob yourself of actually learning from that person.
Mm.
If we can just say, I don't know anything about that, tell me everything you know, and you're okay with that, then that allows the other person to shine, and you get information, you get to intake and learn and expand more. So that's just one place where when you're vulnerable and you're okay with, hey, I don't know everything, you really can then begin to be more immersed in the world.
So having up my armor can actually make it so I don't learn as much
Mm-hmm.
because I'm afraid of putting myself out there, maybe
Yeah.
looking kind of silly because I'm trying to learn a new skill.
Yeah.
Wow, that's just such a great example. I had an example with a friend the other day too,
Hmm.
and it was as an example of allowing emotions, where I was working with her and she had some tears and I had some tears, and the the release there, it took our relationship, I think, to a new level because up until then, I had often been in a teacher role,
Mm-hmm.
and she is someone who is kind of like the best student you could imagine. And so fulfilling that student role,
Mm-hmm.
but within those roles, there's limitations
Mm-hmm.
to connection.
Yeah, well, I feel that whenever we meet someone, in some ways, when we want to have a deeper connection with them, we're looking for them to be vulnerable. And and
Yeah.
the funny thing is that that's the last thing that we want to do. Yet it's the first thing someone is going to be looking for in us. And it can be really a struggle if you know someone that you feel either A, you can't be vulnerable with, or sometimes even harder for me is someone that I feel that isn't able to be vulnerable with me, because I want to be a safe place. I want to have deeper relationships with my friends and my family members. And if someone is feeling as though they always have to be perfect, or they always have to know everything, or that they don't want to receive any kind of feedback that might be construed as
Mm.
negative, that it really is a strain on the relationship. And I think in a deeper sense, we so for me, having Divine Mother in my life has allowed me to have a vulnerability with her and practice it with someone that I feel unconditionally loved by. So it doesn't matter what I do or how I am. It matters. How do I say this? It's not like it doesn't matter, but I can be seen how I am. I'm already seen how I am. I can't and do any hiding, and then that's allows me to go out into the world more and say, okay, well, if I can do that with her, maybe I can do it with people that I feel close to, and then
Yeah.
maybe I can just do it in general and show other people. I was at the bank the other day, and the teller was counting out cash, and it was kind of complicated. And I said, "Oh wow, I'm really glad you're here helping me." And she said, "Well, I'm glad you're here because I'm just a human being." And it felt nice, just this kind of vulnerable. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we talk about being immersed in prayer with Divine Mother, we're thinking about somebody that loves us unconditionally. And unlike a human, maybe isn't going to go blab your secrets to other people or be gossipy. There's uh, this it's a secure place to practice vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe before we start practicing it with other human beings, that can feel a lot more threatening.
Mm-hmm.
But you're so right. I mean, when I was talking with my friend, she was saying, I recognize that it's a gift when I'm vulnerable with other
Mm,
people.
yeah.
It's what they really want, is to be able to have that deeper
Yeah.
connection. And so, but for her, seen often as kind of a pillar in
Mm-hmm.
her social group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's maybe something that affects us a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can get worried about other people. You can think, is this gonna, if I show emotion,
Mm-hmm.
if I show vulnerability, are they gonna feel less secure in their lives because I'm not being this rock for
Yeah,
them?
yeah, that can be a really huge problem as a parent.
Parent, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure women experience that, but also men, you have to really make sure you know what you're doing to be able to face anything. And I mean, we all experience it. So I'm not trying to pinpoint anybody. We experience it in different ways. But then the problem becomes that we lose out,
Hmm.
we lose opportunities. And the thing is, here's the funny thing: if you're vulnerable and you put yourself out there, and I'm not talking about sharing your gushing bleeding wounds with someone you don't know, we need to be vulnerable in the right ways with the right people. But if you put yourself out there in certain ways, maybe you write a book, or you share some music you've written, or a creative concept at work, and you know there's going to be pain sometimes.
Hmm.
There's going to be rejection. There might be even mean-spiritedness. But that's there anyway. It's there if you're vulnerable or you're not. So why not take the path of vulnerability? Understand that it will come with struggles, but it does anyway. And that sometimes those struggles you share with your partner, hey, I'm feeling really vulnerable. And they just like, boom, you know, kind of blindside you with something. And you think, oh, I was just vulnerable with you and you just like totally ate me for breakfast. So there's a spot for growth.
Hmm.
Okay, if you never said anything, they never said anything back, how many years would you go on not having conversations that could make your relationship deeper? So sometimes being vulnerable and even not being met like in a loving, gentle environment allows us to deepen, because maybe then your partner comes back or you come back and say, hey, I shared my my total self with you, and this is how I feel. And then maybe they like break down and they start sharing with you something you never knew. And suddenly, from that one seed of being willing to put yourself out there, something much bigger grows.
Now, because this is a mystic's path, there's a mystical aspect to this. But I think there's one more, I would call it advantage, just from a purely practical standpoint. And that, you talked about men, but yeah, I guess it kind of afflicts all of us. We can think that if we're putting on a show and we're looking tough and we're looking capable, that we are being strong.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you're going to go take cold showers, but you're going to put on a dry suit, if you know what those are. For you basically wouldn't feel any of the cold at all. It's like having an armor.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go in there and you're, oh yeah, I'm taking a cold shower. Look how badass I am. But you're not gaining in strength at all. And so you, by being vulnerable, which looks weak from the outside, we actually gain in strength.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the mystical aspect of this comes in, and that's great on a practical sense. But in the end, this has us looking at our ego.
Yeah.
Because that's the only reason that we fear being vulnerable, is that we're protecting this ego, this idea of who I am. If I practice that radical vulnerability, I mean, really letting go, I start to bear my ego out and maybe start to see that it's not as important as the ego would like us to feel. And that's where we can start to maybe feel our first connections with Divine Mother, with a unity with Divine Mother, with the world, with the crickets and the birds, as we release that armor and that shell.
This gave me a thought while you were talking, because I think that what you're saying is really, really important. And the deeper part is the connection that we feel when we let that go. Because I think actually one of our deepest fears as well is that if we're seen for who we are, we won't be loved. And if we're seen for who we are, we will be cast aside. And I think as a species that needs kind of community for survival, being outcast is the worst thing that you could possibly do. And I mean, that's like, think about primitively, kind of that equals death in a way, not necessarily for everyone, but in general, that's the feeling. And so I think the fear of being vulnerable is the fear of not being accepted, and the fear of being not loved, not cared for, not a part of things. But as you say, when we let go of the armor, we start to realize that we are accepted by more things than we could possibly imagine, and especially by Divine Mother and all of the things that she's manifesting as. We become a part of the whole, and we're this beautiful, part of the whole harmony of the world. And then you can't feel so scared of being cast out.
You can kind of see how the whole game works. We have this ego, and we spend our whole life trying to protect it, fearing that somebody might see through it, even as it's battered and people tell us that we're this and that, and we feel that pain of having our ego disliked. But the whole time, if we get to the end of that game, then we say, whoa, I never got a chance to actually see if anybody likes me.
Yeah.
All I had out there was my ego.
Right.
This was so silly. Why don't we take a chance and let down that armor and start to go on a quest to see, what is this me that I'm upholding so much, that I'm trying to protect so much? And is there something beyond that? And what is it?
Good questions. Yeah. you should share with us your thoughts about this and how vulnerability serves you, the benefits that you found of being vulnerable. And yeah, and what is it? What is it that's there behind the veil?
It's always fun to try to talk about these things that language cannot capture. But I know some of the people that we have watching have had mystical experiences
Mm,
or have, yeah. And so there might be some fun dialogues that go on there as we delve into this a little bit deeper. But yes, please share. And remember, if you are just seeing this on video or you're here for the first time, divinemother.love, go check out our website. And there's more ways to get connected there.
I have a little bit of a challenge to throw in at the end.
Ooh,
And that's what I
yeah.
think between this message and the next message that you watch, which hopefully will be the one next week after this one, that you make for yourself a plan of being vulnerable with somebody at least one time. And by that, I just mean, it could be a safe place. It doesn't have to be a stranger, someone that has earned your vulnerability, and just see what it feels like. Just go into it almost as a kind of, I like to sometimes think of myself as an investigator, maybe Sherlock Holmes, or an experimenter, and say, okay, this is the place I'm going to be vulnerable. And then I notice, and I think, oh wow, I'm being vulnerable, and what's happening? And you know what, who knows what will happen, but it'd be really fun to hear about those experiences and just to try it on a little bit and see if it makes a difference.
That's
So that's my
beautiful.
little homework challenge for the week.
And if that is just too scary, or you just don't have anybody in your life that
Mm,
you feel you can be vulnerable with, then try prayer.
yeah.
Try praying to Divine Mother, and just somewhere where you're private, no one else can hear you,
Mm,
and just unload and share everything that you're afraid to share, and
hmm
just see how that feels.
yeah,
Sometimes just voicing things out can make such a difference.
so true.
Share with us if you take on this challenge.
Yeah, excited to hear about it.
Love to you all.